What if I told you that between this very breath and your next one lies a doorway to the divine that most people walk past 1,000 times a day without ever noticing? Right now, as you're listening to these words, there's an imperceptible moment, barely a heartbeat long, where everything stops, where time itself seems to pause, and where the deepest spiritual truths of existence quietly reveal themselves. This isn't some mystical concept reserved for monks in mountain caves or spiritual masters in ancient temples. Has this ever happened to you? You're rushing through your day, caught in the endless cycle of doing, achieving, and moving from one task to the next, when suddenly something forces you to stop. Maybe it's a delayed train, a long line at the store, or an unexpected wait at the doctor's office. In that moment, most people feel frustrated, anxious, or impatient. But what if I told you that these seemingly mundane interruptions are actually sacred invitations to discover something extraordinary? The great spiritual teacher Emmet Fox understood something profound that modern life has forgotten. He recognized that the eternal now, that space where spirit speaks most clearly, isn't found in perfect meditation conditions or silent retreats. Instead, it exists in the space between one step and the next, in the pause between thoughts, in the sacred silence that lives right in the middle of our noisy, chaotic, beautiful daily existence. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you. We're going to explore how to find meditation not in stillness but in motion, how to discover the divine not in isolation but right in the middle of grocery store lines, traffic jams, and all those moments when life forces us to simply wait. This journey we're beginning together is inspired by Fox's revolutionary understanding that every ordinary moment contains extraordinary potential, that the sacred place between our thoughts and desires isn't somewhere we need to travel to, it's somewhere we're already standing. The question isn't whether this spiritual dimension exists in your daily life. The question is whether you've learned to recognize it. Most of us have been taught that spiritual practice requires special conditions, specific times, and perfect environments. But what if the most powerful spiritual experiences are actually hiding in plain sight, disguised as the very delays and interruptions we typically resist? What if the secret to profound inner peace isn't found in escaping life, but in discovering how to be fully present within it? The ancient wisdom we're about to explore will show you how every moment of waiting, every pause, every seemingly empty space in your day can become a profound gateway to transformation that's been hiding in plain sight your entire life. Here's the hidden truth that changes everything. The silence between two steps isn't emptiness waiting to be filled with activity. It's creation in its purest state, actively working behind the scenes of your awareness. Think about it for a moment. When you're walking, there's that microsecond between lifting one foot and placing the other, where you're completely suspended, completely present, completely alive in a way that defies explanation. That's where your soul awakens, not in some distant spiritual realm, but right here in the most ordinary of human experiences. This revelation transforms how we understand those moments that typically drive us crazy. You know the ones I'm talking about. You're standing in line at the bank, and the person ahead of you seems to be conducting their entire financial history with the teller. Your mind starts racing, your body tenses up, and you begin that familiar internal dialogue of frustration and impatience. Or maybe you're sitting in a medical office, watching the clock tick past your appointment time, feeling that restless energy building up inside you like pressure in a steam kettle. But here's what most people never realize. These aren't interruptions to your spiritual journey. They are your spiritual journey. Every delayed train, every long grocery store line, every moment when technology fails and forces you to simply exist without distraction, these are precisely the moments when The universe is offering you direct access to something extraordinary. The impact of understanding this single shift in perspective cannot be overstated. When you begin to recognize waiting as a spiritual opportunity rather than a personal inconvenience, your entire relationship with time transforms. Instead of feeling like a victim of circumstances beyond your control, you become an active participant in your own awakening. The decisions you make in these moments of forced stillness literally reshape your inner landscape, creating new neural pathways that lead away from anxiety and toward a profound sense of presence. This isn't about positive thinking or trying to convince yourself that frustrating situations are somehow good for you. This is about discovering the actual mechanics of how consciousness operates in real time. When external movement stops, internal movement can finally be observed. When the world forces you to pause, you suddenly have access to layers of awareness that remain completely hidden when you're caught up in the momentum of constant doing. If these insights about finding the sacred in everyday waiting have shifted something in your understanding, I'd love to have you join our community by subscribing. We explore these timeless wisdom teachings in practical ways that actually work in modern life, and there's so much more depth to discover together. The journey from resistance to recognition begins with a simple but revolutionary understanding. Your soul doesn't need perfect conditions to commune with the divine. In fact, it thrives in the spaces between action, in the pauses between breaths, in those suspended moments when ordinary life creates unexpected pockets of stillness. These revelations about the true nature of spiritual practice have been available to humanity for centuries, but our culture of speed and efficiency has trained us to miss them entirely. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic and show you exactly how to recognize these moments when they appear in your daily life, because once you develop this awareness, you'll never experience waiting the same way again. The transformation isn't gradual, it's immediate and undeniable. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to see waiting differently." The moment you start to see these opportunities everywhere, something fascinating happens behind the scenes of your consciousness. You begin to understand that the restless urgency you feel during delays isn't actually coming from the situation itself. It's coming from a part of your mind that Emmet Fox identified as the ego's desperate need for control. This is where the real transformation begins, because haste, that familiar feeling of needing everything to happen right now, belongs entirely to the ego's domain. The ego operates from a mindset of scarcity and fear. It believes that time is running out, that opportunities are slipping away, that every delay is somehow a personal attack on your worthiness or efficiency. This creates an internal pressure cooker where waiting becomes torture, where every unexpected pause feels like a theft of your precious time. But here's the profound shift that changes everything. Your spirit, your true essence, has no concept of hurry because it exists in eternity. Think about this for a moment. When you're deeply absorbed in something you love, time seems to disappear. Hours can pass in what feels like minutes. That's because you've temporarily stepped out of ego time and into spirit time, where the present moment expands to contain everything you need. This isn't just a pleasant experience. It's a glimpse into how consciousness actually operates when it's not filtered through the ego's anxious demands for instant gratification. The hidden truth about waiting is that it's actually a doorway between these two completely different ways of experiencing reality. When you approach waiting from the ego's perspective, armed with impatience and resistance, you're essentially building a prison around yourself. Every minute stretches like an hour. Every delay becomes evidence that life is somehow working against you. But when you shift into higher consciousness, something magical happens. The same waiting period that would have felt like torture suddenly becomes a sanctuary. The fact that this message about transforming waiting into prayer has resonated with you means something. If you've felt that connection, that recognition of truth, a simple, like on this video, helps this understanding reach others who are ready to see their daily delays as divine appointments. This isn't about pretending to be patient or forcing yourself to enjoy frustrating situations. This is about recognizing that faith and awareness can literally transform the quality of time itself. When you wait from this elevated perspective, you're no longer a victim of circumstances. You become someone who understands that every pause has purpose, every delay contains wisdom, and every moment of forced stillness is actually an invitation to connect with something larger than your immediate desires. The impact of this shift reverberates through every area of your life. Decisions that once felt urgent and stressful begin to reveal themselves as opportunities for deeper consideration. Relationships improve because you're no longer bringing that frantic energy of impatience into your interactions with others. Your entire nervous system begins to operate from a place of trust rather than anxiety, creating a ripple effect that influences everything from your sleep quality to your creative capacity. What's remarkable is how quickly this transformation can occur once you understand the mechanics behind it. You don't need years of meditation practice or extensive spiritual training. You simply need to recognize that waiting is choice point, where you can either align with the ego's demands for control or surrender to the spirit's natural rhythm of unfolding. Now, I want to show you exactly how this surrender process works and what happens when you begin to treat these everyday interruptions as sacred appointments rather than inconvenient obstacles, because once you experience waiting as a sanctuary even once, you'll never want to go back to the prison of impatience. Write in the comments, "I choose sanctuary over prison." The surrender process reveals something even more profound about the nature of these waiting moments that will completely revolutionize how you understand your daily experiences. When you approach each second of delay with this new awareness, something extraordinary happens behind the scenes of ordinary consciousness. Every moment of waiting becomes what Emmet Fox called a wordless prayer. Not because you're actively trying to pray, but because you're connecting with the living presence that exists within you at all times. This isn't religious doctrine or abstract spirituality. This is practical transformation that you can verify through direct experience. That restless energy you normally feel when stuck in traffic or standing in a slow-moving line is actually your soul trying to communicate with you. Instead of fighting these moments or filling them with mental chatter and complaints, you begin to recognize them as invitations to commune with something deeper than your surface thoughts and immediate desires. The hidden truth that changes everything is this: nothing in your life is accidental. Not the delayed appointment that forces you to sit quietly for 20 minutes. Not the technology malfunction that creates an unexpected pause in your productivity. Not even the person ahead of you in line who seems to be moving in slow motion. When you understand that divine principle operates through every circumstance, you realize that what appears to be random inconvenience is actually intelligent design. This conversation about finding God in the space between two steps feels like it was meant for those who made it this far. If you're someone who's ready to approach life's interruptions as spiritual opportunities, subscribing to this channel connects you with more of these practical wisdom teachings. And if this perspective has touched something real in your experience, your light tells me, we're walking this path of conscious waiting together. This revelation transforms your entire relationship with uncertainty and delay, because you begin to see that every seemingly empty instant is actually a closed opportunity waiting to be opened. The key lies in recognizing that your normal state of mind, caught up in the momentum of constant doing and achieving, actually prevents you from accessing these opportunities. It's only when external movement stops that internal movement can be clearly perceived. Think about the last time you were forced to wait unexpectedly. Your mind probably immediately went to work, trying to figure out how to escape the situation, how to speed things up, or how to use the time productively. But what if, instead of trying to fill that space with activity or mental planning, you simply allowed yourself to rest in the pause itself? What if you treated that interruption as a sacred appointment that was scheduled specifically for your spiritual development? The impact of this shift in perspective creates a domino effect throughout your entire life experience. Decisions that once felt overwhelming begin to reveal their natural timing. Relationships improve because you're no longer bringing the frantic energy of impatience into your interactions. Your creativity expands because you're creating space for inspiration to emerge rather than forcing solutions through mental effort alone. What's happening at the deepest level is that you're learning to align with the natural rhythm of how life actually unfolds, rather than fighting against it with the ego's demands for control and immediate gratification. This alignment doesn't require you to become passive or resigned. Instead, it invites you to become actively present in a way that most people never experience. The journey from seeing waiting as punishment to recognizing it as prayer happens gradually, but the first shift can occur instantly the moment you choose to experiment with this new perspective. Each time you find yourself in one of these forced pauses, you have an opportunity to practice this sacred art of presence. Now, I want to explore exactly what happens when you begin to approach these everyday interruptions as doorways rather than obstacles, because the revelations that emerge from this practice will fundamentally alter how you navigate not just waiting, but every aspect of your daily existence. Write in the comments, "I see the divine design now." When you start to approach these interruptions as doorways, you discover something that will completely reshape your understanding of how spiritual awakening actually works in real life. Waiting isn't some cosmic mistake or divine oversight that you need to endure until real life resumes. It's actually a secret door that's been strategically placed right in the middle of your path, not to punish or test your patience, but to awaken something within you that can only be accessed when the normal flow of activity comes to a halt. This hidden truth reveals why so many people struggle with meditation in traditional settings, but can experience profound states of presence during unexpected delays. The formal meditation cushion can actually become another form of doing, another task to accomplish, another way for the ego to maintain its sense of control through spiritual achievement. But when life forces you to stop without warning, when you have absolutely no choice but to be still, the ego's usual strategies suddenly become ineffective. Here's what's happening behind the scenes during these moments that most people never recognize. Waiting creates what spiritual teachers call the soul's terrain, a specific psychological landscape where the ego's dominance begins to naturally dissolve. The ego thrives on momentum, on the illusion that it's directing the show, on the constant stream of decisions and actions that reinforce its sense of importance. But in genuine waiting, all of that machinery comes to a grinding halt. The transformation occurs because the ego desperately needs control to maintain its identity, while your spirit is already perfectly aligned with divine order. When external circumstances remove your ability to control the timeline, to manipulate the outcome, or to force progress through willpower, the ego starts to panic. That restless, agitated feeling you experience during delays is actually the ego realizing it's losing its grip on the situation. But here's the beautiful paradox. The more the ego dissolves during these moments, the more your true nature can emerge. What felt like powerlessness from the ego's perspective reveals itself as profound empowerment from the spirit's perspective. You begin to experience what it feels like to be held by something larger than your personal will, to be guided by an intelligence that operates beyond your conscious planning and scheming. The impact of recognizing this dynamic creates a complete reversal in how you interpret life's interruptions. Instead of seeing delays as evidence that something's wrong, you begin to understand them as precisely timed opportunities for spiritual recalibration. The decisions you make during these threshold moments literally determine whether you'll continue operating from ego consciousness or step into something far more expansive and peaceful. This isn't about becoming passive or resigned to frustrating circumstances. It's about discovering the active power that becomes available when you stop fighting reality and start working with the deeper currents that are always moving beneath the surface of apparent chaos. The journey from resistance to collaboration with these moments reveals layers of wisdom that remain completely hidden when you're caught up in the ego's demands for immediate gratification. What's remarkable is how quickly this shift can occur once you understand what's actually happening during these forced pauses. Each waiting period becomes a miniature spiritual retreat, a brief but powerful opportunity to remember who you really are beneath all the roles and responsibilities and urgent tasks that normally consume your attention. Now, I want to reveal exactly how to recognize when these dissolution moments are occurring and what specific practices can help you navigate them with grace rather than resistance, because once you learn to use waiting as a spiritual technology, you'll never experience delay the same way again. Write in the comments, "My ego is ready to dissolve." Learning to use waiting as a spiritual technology begins with a simple but revolutionary recognition. Wherever you are, when forced to pause, wherever you find yourself when the world slows down, that exact spot can become an altar. This isn't metaphorical language or wishful thinking. This is practical spiritual mechanics that you can verify through direct experience. The moment you close your eyes and genuinely connect with your inner being, regardless of whether you're standing in a grocery store line or sitting in a traffic jam, you've just created sacred space. The transformation happens because an altar isn't defined by its physical location or elaborate decorations. An altar is created by the quality of attention you bring to the moment, by your willingness to recognize that the divine presence isn't confined to churches or meditation halls. When you understand this, every forced pause becomes an opportunity to step out of ordinary consciousness and into something far more profound and nourishing. Here's the hidden truth that changes everything about how you experience these interruptions. Waiting is actually spiritual fire, not punishment. This revelation completely reverses the typical mindset that sees delays as obstacles to overcome or inconveniences to endure. Fire, in spiritual terms, represents purification, transformation, and the burning away of everything that isn't essential. When life forces you to slow down, it's creating the perfect conditions for this inner alchemy to occur. The impact of understanding this becomes clear when you consider how this principle operated in the most significant spiritual journey in human history. Jesus himself waited 30 years before beginning his public ministry. 30 years of what most people would consider ordinary, unremarkable daily life. 30 years of developing inner strength, deepening his connection to divine purpose and allowing his consciousness to mature into something capable of transforming the world. This isn't about comparing yourself to religious figures or setting impossible standards. This is about recognizing that the same principle that guided the most profound spiritual awakening in history is available to you right now, in the smallest moments of forced stillness. Every delay is an opportunity for this kind of inner development. Every unexpected pause is a chance to strengthen your connection to something larger than your immediate desires and plans. The journey from seeing waiting as wasted time to recognizing it as sacred preparation happens gradually, but the shift in perspective can occur instantly. When you're standing in that slow-moving line or sitting in that delayed meeting, you have a choice. You can treat it as evidence that life is working against you, or you can recognize it as life creating the exact conditions needed for your spiritual development. What's happening behind the scenes during these moments is that your consciousness is being refined, your patience is being strengthened, and your capacity to remain present in the face of uncertainty is being expanded. These aren't abstract spiritual concepts. They're practical life skills that will serve you in every relationship, every challenge, and every decision you'll ever face. The revelations that emerge from this practice go far beyond learning how to wait more peacefully. You begin to understand how divine timing actually operates, how the universe coordinates circumstances in ways that your logical mind could never orchestrate, and how surrender paradoxically becomes the pathway to true empowerment. Now, I want to explore exactly what happens when you begin to treat these everyday moments of waiting as opportunities for this kind of spiritual refinement. Because the practical techniques that emerge from this understanding will give you tools you can use immediately. Write in the comments, "I'm ready for spiritual fire." The practical techniques that emerge from treating waiting as spiritual refinement center around a profound shift in how you relate to the present moment itself. Being truly present doesn't mean trying to enjoy frustrating situations or pretending that delays don't matter. Being present means accepting the now without resistance, which creates an entirely different frequency of consciousness than the one most people operate from during unexpected interruptions. This acceptance isn't passive resignation. It's active alignment with what Emmet Fox called God's frequency, a rhythm of existence that is never in a rush, but never late. When you tune into this frequency during moments of forced stillness, something remarkable happens behind the scenes of your awareness. Your nervous system begins to shift from the fight-or-flight response that delays typically trigger into a state of receptive openness that allows for entirely different kinds of insights and experiences. The hidden truth about this transformation is that it doesn't require years of practice or perfect conditions. It simply requires your willingness to experiment with a different way of interpreting what's happening when life slows you down. Instead of seeing waiting as dead time that needs to be filled with productive activity or mental planning, you begin to recognize it as live time that's specifically designed for a different kind of receiving. This is where the concept of wordless prayer becomes practical rather than abstract. When you use waiting well, when you allow your soul to sit in silence without making demands on the situation, without trying to control the timeline, without generating complaints or solutions, you create the perfect conditions for hearing what can only be perceived in stillness. These aren't mystical experiences reserved for spiritual adepts. They're subtle but unmistakable shifts in awareness that anyone can access. The impact of this practice reveals itself in unexpected ways throughout your daily life. Decisions that once felt overwhelming begin to clarify naturally. Relationships improve because you're bringing a different quality of presence to your interactions. Creative solutions emerge seemingly out of nowhere because you've created space for inspiration to operate rather than forcing outcomes through mental effort alone. What's happening at the deepest level is that you're learning to receive guidance through receptivity rather than seeking answers through analysis. The whispers from above that Fox wrote about aren't dramatic voices or supernatural communications. They're subtle knowings, gentle insights, and quiet certainties that arise when the mind stops its constant chatter and allows deeper wisdom to surface. The journey from treating waiting as inconvenience to recognizing it as communication happens gradually, but each successful experiment with this approach builds your confidence in the process. You begin to notice that the information you receive during these quiet moments is often more valuable than anything you could have figured out through conventional problem-solving methods. The revelations that emerge from this practice go far beyond learning better patience. You start to understand how intuition actually operates, how divine timing coordinates circumstances in ways that serve your highest good, and how surrender becomes the pathway to accessing wisdom that's always available but rarely accessed in our culture of constant motion and immediate gratification. What makes this approach so powerful is that it works with the natural rhythm of how consciousness operates, rather than fighting against it. Instead of seeing delays as obstacles to your spiritual development, you begin to recognize them as precisely timed opportunities for the kind of inner listening that transforms not just how you wait, but how you navigate every aspect of your existence. Now, I want to show you exactly how to distinguish between ordinary mental noise and these deeper communications that become available during moments of stillness, because developing this discernment will revolutionize your relationship with uncertainty and change your approach to decision-making in profound ways. Write in the comments, "I'm learning to listen differently." Developing this discernment begins with understanding why most people instinctively flee from the very silence that could transform their lives. There's something about genuine quietude that triggers a deep-seated fear in human consciousness, a terror of emptiness that drives us to fill every pause with noise, activity, or mental chatter. But this fear is based on a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of silence itself. The hidden truth that changes everything is that silence isn't emptiness waiting to be filled. It's fullness that can only be perceived when the constant stream of mental noise finally subsides. This revelation completely transforms how you approach those moments when life forces you to be still. Instead of experiencing anxiety about the absence of activity, you begin to recognize these pauses as opportunities to access a dimension of consciousness that remains completely hidden when you're caught up in the momentum of constant doing. What's happening behind the scenes during these moments of imposed stillness is something that most people never realize. Silence is not stagnation, but spiritual gestation. Just as wheat requires the hidden work of underground germination before it can emerge into visible growth, your soul needs these periods of apparent inactivity to bloom into its full potential. The decisions you make about how to relate to silence literally determine whether you'll access this deeper dimension of development or continue operating from the surface level of ordinary consciousness. This process of spiritual gestation operates according to natural laws that our culture of instant gratification has trained us to ignore. The impact of understanding these laws creates a complete reversal in how you interpret the rhythm of your daily experience. Instead of seeing productive activity as the only valuable use of time, you begin to recognize that certain kinds of growth can only occur during periods of receptive stillness. The transformation happens when you stop trying to escape silence and start learning to inhabit it with the same quality of attention you bring to important conversations. When you're truly present with silence, not fighting it or trying to fill it, but genuinely listening to what it contains, you discover that it's actually alive, with subtle communications that are always available but rarely accessed. The journey from fearing silence to trusting it requires a fundamental shift in your understanding of how consciousness operates. Mental noise, the constant stream of planning, worrying, analyzing, and commentary that usually fills your awareness, operates on a completely different frequency than the deeper communications that emerge from stillness. Learning to distinguish between these two types of mental activity is like developing the ability to hear whispered conversations in a crowded room. What makes this discernment possible is recognizing that deeper communications don't arrive as thoughts that you have to figure out or analyze. They arrive as knowings that feel more like remembering than discovering, insights that carry a quality of certainty that doesn't require proof or validation. These revelations about how intuitive wisdom actually operates become accessible once you understand that silence creates the necessary conditions for this more subtle form of perception. The practical impact of developing this capacity extends far beyond learning to wait more peacefully. You begin to access a source of guidance that operates beyond the limitations of logical analysis, a form of intelligence that can perceive patterns and possibilities that remain invisible to conventional thinking. This isn't about replacing rational thought, but about expanding your range of perception to include dimensions of awareness that most people never tap into. Now, I want to explore exactly how this process of spiritual gestation unfolds in real time and what specific signs indicate that this deeper transformation is occurring, because once you learn to recognize these subtle indicators, you'll never doubt the value of silence again. Write in the comments, "Silence is my teacher now." The specific signs that this deeper transformation is occurring begin to reveal themselves in ways that might surprise you. When you first start experimenting with inhabiting silence rather than fleeing from it, something unsettling often happens. All the masks you normally wear begin to fall away, and insecurities that you've successfully kept buried beneath constant activity suddenly rise to the surface. This can feel deeply uncomfortable at first, which is why so many people instinctively retreat back into noise and distraction. But here's the hidden truth that changes everything about how you interpret these uncomfortable moments. This rising of insecurities isn't a sign that something's wrong with your practice. It's a blessing in disguise. What you're witnessing is the natural process of purification that occurs when consciousness is given space to operate without the usual defenses and distractions. The impact of understanding this completely transforms your relationship with the discomfort that can arise during genuine stillness. Behind the scenes of this process, something remarkable is happening that most people never recognize. When insecurities and hidden fears are seen with awareness, rather than pushed away or analyzed to death, they begin to dissolve naturally, not through force or positive thinking, but through the simple act of conscious witnessing. This is why silence becomes such a powerful tool for transformation. It creates the conditions where this kind of organic healing can occur. The journey from resisting these uncomfortable revelations to welcoming them as signs of progress requires a fundamental shift in your mindset about what spiritual growth actually looks like. Most people expect awakening to feel blissful and peaceful all the time, but the reality is that genuine transformation often begins with becoming aware of patterns and limitations that have been operating beneath conscious awareness. What's happening during these moments of uncomfortable clarity is that you're being given the opportunity to release psychological baggage that has been weighing you down without you even realizing it. The decisions you make about how to respond to these insights literally determine whether this natural purification process can continue or whether you'll retreat back into the familiar comfort of constant distraction. This is where the deeper understanding of silence as divine communication becomes practical rather than abstract. When you resist silence, you're actually resisting the very presence that's trying to heal and transform you. God, or divine intelligence, or whatever term resonates with your understanding, manifests most clearly when the noise of mental chatter finally ceases. This presence doesn't impose itself dramatically or demand attention through spectacular displays. It's always there, quietly available, waiting for the space to make itself known. The revelations that emerge from learning to work with, rather than against this process, extend far beyond personal healing. You begin to understand how consciousness actually operates when it's not filtered through the ego's constant need for control and validation. You discover that there's an intelligence within you that knows things your thinking mind could never figure out. And this intelligence becomes accessible through receptive stillness. The transformation that occurs when you stop seeing silence as empty space to be filled and start recognizing it as fertile ground for inner development creates ripple effects throughout every area of your life. Relationships deepen because you're no longer bringing unexamined insecurities into your interactions. Creative projects flow more easily because you've learned to access inspiration through receptivity rather than forcing outcomes through mental effort. Now I want to reveal exactly how to navigate these moments when uncomfortable truths rise to the surface, because learning to work with this natural purification process rather than against it will accelerate your spiritual development in ways that might astonish you. Write in the comments, I welcome what needs to be seen. Learning to navigate these moments when uncomfortable truths surface requires understanding a fundamental principle that completely reverses everything our achievement-oriented culture has taught us about personal development. The soul doesn't awaken through doing more, trying harder, or accomplishing greater feats of spiritual discipline. The soul awakens through not doing, through the radical act of stopping long enough to remember what you actually are beneath all the roles, responsibilities, and identities you've constructed. This revelation transforms how you approach those uncomfortable moments when silence reveals aspects of yourself you'd rather not see. Instead of immediately jumping into action to fix, improve, or transcend what's arising, you learn to simply be with whatever is surfacing. When you stop doing and begin to be, something profound shifts in your relationship. With these revelations, they stop feeling like problems to solve and start feeling like information to receive. The hidden truth that changes everything about self-acceptance lies in recognizing that divine love isn't conditional on your performance, your progress, or your ability to maintain a positive attitude during challenging moments. God doesn't love you for what you do, but for what you are, a divine child whose very existence fills the universe with meaning. This understanding creates a safety net that allows you to face whatever arises during silence without the fear that experiencing difficult emotions or acknowledging limitations will somehow diminish your worth. The impact of truly absorbing this truth creates a complete transformation in your approach to spiritual development. Instead of using waiting periods to mentally rehearse self-improvement strategies or plan how to become a better person, you begin to use these moments to simply rest in the awareness of your inherent wholeness. This shift from self-improvement to self-recognition represents a fundamental change in how consciousness relates to itself. What's happening behind the scenes during this process is that you're learning to distinguish between the temporary emotional and psychological patterns that arise and fall away, and the unchanging essence that witnesses all these fluctuations without being disturbed by them. The decisions you make about where to place your identity, in the changing patterns or in the unchanging witness, literally determine your level of inner peace and your capacity to remain centered during life's inevitable challenges. The journey from constantly trying to fix yourself to simply being yourself requires courage, because our culture has convinced us that we're only valuable when we're producing, achieving, or improving. But the revelations that emerge from learning to rest in your inherent worth, rather than striving to earn it, create a foundation of inner stability that external circumstances can't shake. This doesn't mean becoming passive or abandoning all goals and aspirations. It means operating from a completely different starting point, the understanding that you're already complete, already loved, already enough. From this foundation, action becomes an expression of joy rather than a desperate attempt to prove your worth or escape your limitations. The transformation that occurs when you truly embody this understanding extends far beyond personal peace. Your relationships improve because you're no longer seeking validation or trying to manage other people's perceptions of you. Your creative expression flows more freely because you're no longer paralyzed by the fear of imperfection. Your decision-making becomes clearer because you're no longer driven by the ego's desperate need to maintain control or avoid discomfort. Now, I want to explore exactly how this shift from doing to being manifests in practical terms during those everyday moments of waiting, because understanding how to anchor yourself in this inherent wholeness while life swirls around you will give you access to an unshakable source of inner strength. Write in the comments, "I am enough as I am." Understanding how to anchor yourself in this inherent wholeness during everyday waiting moments reveals something that will fundamentally change your entire approach to spiritual practice. The kingdom of God that spiritual traditions have pointed toward. 4. Millennia doesn't come through increased activity, more intense practices, or greater spiritual achievements. It comes when you finally stop long enough to notice that it's already within you, has always been within you, and is simply waiting for your recognition. This revelation transforms every delay from an inconvenience into an invitation to remember what you've temporarily forgotten. When you're stuck in traffic or standing in a long line, instead of seeing these moments as interruptions to your spiritual journey, you begin to recognize them as precisely the conditions needed to discover that the kingdom you've been seeking is accessible right here, right now, in the most ordinary circumstances imaginable. The hidden truth about this discovery process is that it requires a completely different kind of thinking than what most people use during waiting periods. True spiritual thought isn't the endless reasoning, planning, and mental commentary that usually fills these forced pauses. True spiritual thought is communion with truth, a quality of awareness that Fox called thinking without thinking, which represents a higher form of consciousness than analytical mental activity. This shift from reasoning to communing happens when you stop trying to figure out how to make waiting more productive or how to solve the problems that mental chatter typically generates during delays. Instead, you allow your awareness to settle into a receptive state where insights and understandings can emerge naturally rather than being forced through mental effort. The impact of this transition creates access to wisdom that operates beyond the limitations of logical thinking. What's happening behind the scenes during this process is that you're learning to distinguish between two completely different modes of consciousness. The reasoning mind operates through comparison, analysis, and projection, constantly trying to control outcomes and manage future scenarios. But the communing mind operates through direct knowing, intuitive understanding, and present-moment awareness that doesn't require proof or validation. The journey from one mode to the other isn't about suppressing thought or trying to empty your mind completely. It's about learning to shift your attention from the surface level of mental activity to the deeper current of awareness that runs beneath all thoughts. This deeper current contains the kingdom that has always been present but remains hidden when consciousness is caught up in the turbulence of constant mental activity. The transformation that occurs when you access this state during ordinary waiting periods creates revelations about how consciousness actually operates when it's not filtered through the ego's demands for control and understanding. You begin to experience firsthand what spiritual teachers have been pointing toward when they speak of presence, being, and the eternal now that exists independent of circumstances. The practical impact of developing this capacity extends far beyond personal peace during delays. You start to approach decision-making from an entirely different foundation, one that includes both logical analysis and intuitive knowing. Your relationships deepen because you're bringing a quality of presence that most people rarely experience. Your creative expression flows more naturally because you've learned to access inspiration through receptivity rather than force. What makes this approach so powerful is that it works with the natural rhythm of consciousness rather than fighting against it. Instead of seeing waiting as dead time that needs to be filled with productive thinking, you begin to recognize these pauses as live opportunities to commune with the source of all creativity, all wisdom, and all peace. Now, I want to reveal exactly how this communion process unfolds in real time and what specific practices can help you access this higher consciousness during the most mundane moments of your daily routine. because once you experience thinking without thinking even once, you'll understand why ancient wisdom traditions have considered this the highest spiritual attainment. Write in the comments, "I'm ready for communion with truth." The communion process that unfolds during these moments of receptive waiting operates according to principles that most people have never been taught to recognize. When your mind shifts from analytical reasoning to this deeper mode of awareness, something extraordinary happens behind the scenes of ordinary consciousness. The higher mind, when touched by divine light, begins to function like a compass, completely silent yet always pointing toward truth, always oriented toward what serves your highest good, always aligned with the deeper currents of wisdom that flow beneath surface-level thinking. This transformation from mental noise to inner guidance happens so subtly that you might miss it if you're not paying attention. Unlike the loud, insistent voice of analytical thinking that demands immediate answers and concrete solutions, this higher intelligence operates through gentle nudges, quiet certainties, and what can only be described as a kind of thought that needs no words. It's like an inner fragrance filling your mind with light, creating clarity without explanation, understanding without analysis. The hidden truth about accessing this state is that it doesn't require years of meditation practice or perfect spiritual discipline. It simply requires your willingness to stop filling every moment of delay with mental activity and allow space for this subtler form of communication to emerge. When you're standing in that slow-moving line or sitting in that delayed meeting, instead of immediately reaching for your phone or starting an internal conversation about how inconvenient the situation is, you can choose to become receptive to this wordless guidance. The impact of learning to recognize and trust this inner compass extends far beyond finding peace during waiting periods. You begin to navigate major life decisions from an entirely different foundation, one that includes both logical analysis and intuitive knowing. The revelations that emerge from this practice often surprise people with their practical relevance and their accuracy in pointing towards solutions that the reasoning mind couldn't have discovered on its own. What's happening during these moments of communion is that you're accessing a dimension of intelligence that operates beyond the limitations of personal knowledge and past experience. This isn't mystical fantasy. It's practical spirituality that you can verify through direct experience. When you allow your mind to settle into this receptive state during forced pauses, insights often arise that feel more like remembering than discovering, solutions that carry a quality of certainty that doesn't require external validation. The journey from mental chatter to inner fragrance requires a fundamental shift in how you understand the purpose of thinking itself. Most people use their minds like hammers, constantly trying to force solutions through mental effort and repetitive analysis. But the higher mind operates more like a flower opening to sunlight, receiving rather than forcing, allowing rather than controlling, trusting rather than demanding. This doesn't mean abandoning rational thought or making decisions based solely on feelings. It means expanding your range of perception to include dimensions of awareness that most people never access because they've never learned to create the necessary conditions of receptive stillness. The decisions you make about how to use these everyday moments of waiting literally determine whether you'll develop this capacity or continue operating from the limited perspective of surface-level thinking. The transformation that occurs when you begin to trust this inner compass creates ripple effects throughout every area of your life. Professional challenges that once felt overwhelming begin to reveal unexpected solutions. Relationship difficulties that seemed impossible to navigate suddenly offer new pathways forward. Creative projects that felt blocked begin to flow with renewed inspiration and clarity. Now, I want to explore exactly how to distinguish between genuine inner guidance and the ego's attempts to imitate this deeper wisdom, because developing this discernment will ensure that you're actually accessing divine intelligence rather than sophisticated self-deception. Write in the comments, "My inner compass is awakening." Developing this discernment between genuine inner guidance and the ego's sophisticated imitations requires understanding a fundamental truth that completely transforms how you approach spiritual practice in everyday life. The divine presence you're learning to access doesn't only manifest in perfect meditation settings or elevated spiritual experiences. God is present even in the most mundane places, standing in bread lines, waiting at bus stops, sitting in crowded waiting rooms. The divine hides like treasure in a field, and that field is your ordinary daily life, not some distant spiritual realm you need to travel toward. This revelation changes everything about how you interpret those moments when life forces you to slow down. Instead of seeing delays as interruptions to your spiritual journey, you begin to recognize them as precisely the circumstances where divine intelligence becomes most accessible. The hidden truth is that spiritual awakening doesn't happen despite mundane circumstances. It happens through them, in them, as them. When you learn to recognize what's actually present, the impact of understanding this principle creates a complete transformation in your approach to discernment. Genuine inner guidance often arrives not during dramatic spiritual experiences, but during the most ordinary moments imaginable. When you're waiting for your coffee to brew, standing in a slow checkout line, or sitting in unexpected traffic, these are precisely the moments when the ego's defenses are down and authentic wisdom can slip through the cracks of mental resistance. What's happening behind the scenes during these seemingly insignificant pauses is that you're being given opportunities to practice the most practical form of spiritual development possible. Christ came not to crown elaborate temples or validate complex religious systems, but to awaken the human mind in the simplest moments. The journey from missing these opportunities to recognizing them as sacred appointments requires a fundamental shift in where you look for spiritual truth. The ego's imitation of divine guidance typically arrives with drama, urgency, and demands for immediate action. It speaks in the language of fear, scarcity, and control, often disguised as spiritual insight, but carrying the familiar energy of anxiety and pressure. Genuine divine guidance, by contrast, emerges with quiet certainty, gentle persistence, and a quality of peace that doesn't require you to convince anyone else of its validity. The transformation that occurs when you learn to distinguish between these two voices happens gradually through practice in exactly the kinds of ordinary situations we've been exploring. Each time you're forced to wait, each moment when plans don't unfold according to your timeline, each pause that interrupts the flow of constant activity, you have an opportunity to practice tuning into the frequency of authentic guidance rather than the ego's anxious commentary. The revelations that emerge from this practice extend far beyond personal spiritual development. You begin to understand how divine intelligence actually operates in the world, not through supernatural interventions that bypass natural law, but through the continuous coordination of ordinary circumstances that create exactly the conditions needed for awakening to occur. Your decisions about how to interpret these everyday interruptions literally determine whether you'll access this intelligence or continue operating from the limited perspective of ego consciousness. What makes this approach so powerful is that it transforms every mundane moment into a potential spiritual practice. You don't need special conditions, perfect timing, or ideal circumstances to commune with divine presence. You simply need the willingness to recognize that the treasure you're seeking is already buried in the field of your current experience, waiting to be discovered through the simple act of conscious attention. Now, I want to reveal exactly how this recognition process unfolds when you begin to approach even the most frustrating delays as opportunities for divine encounter, because understanding this will give you access to a source of guidance that's always available, but rarely accessed in our culture of constant motion and immediate gratification. Write in the comments, I see treasure in ordinary moments. The recognition process that unfolds when you approach frustrating delays as opportunities for divine encounter reveals something profound about how spiritual timing actually operates in the real world. Delay has developed such a bad reputation in our culture of instant gratification that most people automatically interpret any interruption to their timeline as evidence that something has gone wrong. But here's the hidden truth that changes everything. God is never late. Divine intelligence manifests according to its own perfect rhythm, a timing that takes into account factors and connections that your conscious mind could never coordinate or even perceive. This revelation transforms your entire relationship with uncertainty and unexpected changes of plan. Instead of seeing delays as cosmic mistakes or personal inconveniences, you begin to recognize them as precisely timed opportunities for the kind of inner alignment that can only occur when external momentum comes to a halt. The impact of this shift in perspective creates access to a completely different way of navigating life's inevitable interruptions and unexpected detours. What's happening behind the scenes when you resist delay is that you're actually interrupting a larger rhythm, falling out of harmony with what Fox called God's music. Think about what happens when a musician tries to force their instrument to play faster than the tempo of the orchestra. The result isn't improved performance, it's discord, tension, and a breakdown in the beautiful coordination that makes music possible. The same principle operates in daily life when you fight against divine timing rather than learning to flow with it. The transformation from resistance to alignment happens when you understand that delays aren't obstacles to divine plan. They are part of the divine plan. Every unexpected pause, every moment when circumstances refuse to bend to your personal timeline, every situation that forces you to slow down or wait longer than you'd prefer, these are all movements in a larger symphony that's being conducted by an intelligence far more comprehensive than your individual desires and preferences. The journey from seeing delays as problems to recognizing them as solutions requires a fundamental shift in how you understand the relationship between your will and divine will. Most people approach this relationship as a struggle, constantly trying to convince God to align with their timing rather than learning to align with divine timing. But when you begin to trust that the delays in your life are actually divine interventions designed to bring you into greater harmony with your highest good, everything changes. The revelations that emerge from practicing this trust extend far beyond personal peace during inconvenient situations. You begin to notice patterns in how circumstances coordinate in ways that your logical mind couldn't have orchestrated. Solutions appear at exactly the right moment. People enter your life precisely when their guidance or support is most needed. Opportunities unfold with a timing that seems almost magical until you understand that you're witnessing the natural operation of divine intelligence working through apparently random events. The decisions you make about how to respond to delays literally determine whether you'll access this coordinating intelligence or continue operating from the limited perspective of ego consciousness that sees only obstacles where spirit sees opportunities. When you align with divine rhythm rather than fighting against it, you discover that what seemed like interruptions to your plans were actually course corrections designed to bring you into greater alignment with your authentic path. Now, I want to explore exactly what happens when you begin to dance with divine timing rather than wrestling against it, because understanding this rhythm will give you access to a source of effortless coordination that makes life flow in ways that most people consider miraculous, but which are actually the natural result of conscious alignment with spiritual principle. Write in the comments, I'm learning to dance with divine timing. When you begin to dance with divine timing, rather than wrestling against it, something profound shifts in your understanding of what it means to navigate life's challenges and uncertainties. The effortless coordination that emerges from this alignment reveals a hidden truth that transforms every moment of waiting from isolation into communion. You are never alone. There's an infinite, wise, loving presence that accompanies you through every delay, every unexpected interruption, every moment when circumstances refuse to conform to your personal timeline. This presence is as constant and reliable as the breath you breathe, yet most people remain completely unaware of its existence. The reason this presence goes unrecognized isn't because it's absent or inactive, but because most people are looking for the wrong kind of evidence. The transformation in your awareness begins when you understand that God is not an emotion, but a principle, an unchanging law of love and intelligence that operates whether you feel it or not. Divine presence doesn't always produce warm feelings in your chest or tears of gratitude in your eyes. More often, it manifests as calm certainty, quiet stability, and an unexplainable sense that everything is ultimately going to work out, even when external circumstances suggest otherwise. This revelation completely changes how you interpret those moments when waiting feels uncomfortable or when delays trigger anxiety about the future. Instead of seeing the absence of dramatic spiritual sensations as evidence that you're disconnected from divine support, you begin to recognize that presence often manifests as the simple capacity to remain centered when life becomes unpredictable. The hidden truth is that the same intelligence that coordinates your heartbeat and manages your breathing is orchestrating the circumstances of your daily life with equal precision and care. What's happening behind the scenes during moments of forced stillness is that you're being given opportunities to notice this constant companionship that usually remains in the background of awareness. When external distractions are removed and you can't immediately fix or control the situation, space opens for recognizing the profound support that's always available but rarely acknowledged. The impact of developing this recognition extends far beyond finding comfort during delays. It creates an unshakable foundation of inner security that external circumstances can't disturb. The journey from feeling isolated during waiting periods to experiencing constant divine companionship requires a shift from seeking evidence through dramatic experiences to recognizing evidence through subtle presence. This presence doesn't announce itself with fanfare or demand attention through spectacular displays. It reveals itself through the simple fact that you continue to breathe, that your heart continues to beat, that solutions continue to appear, that you continue to be sustained through every challenge and transition. The decisions you make about how to interpret these everyday moments of stillness literally determine whether you'll access this companionship or continue operating from the illusion of separation that creates so much unnecessary suffering. When you approach waiting as an opportunity to commune with this ever-present support rather than endure isolation until circumstances improve, you discover that loneliness is actually impossible once you understand what's always accompanying you. The revelations that emerge from this practice create ripple effects throughout every area of your experience. Relationships improve because you're no longer seeking from others. What you've discovered is already present within the divine relationship. Decision-making becomes clearer because you're operating from a foundation of supported confidence rather than anxious uncertainty. Creative expression flows more naturally because you're accessing inspiration from a source that's infinitely creative and always available. Now, I want to reveal exactly how to cultivate awareness of this constant companionship during the most mundane moments of your daily routine, because once you experience the reality of never being alone, your entire relationship with uncertainty, change, and even suffering will be transformed in ways that might astonish you. Write in the comments, "I feel the presence that never leaves." Cultivating awareness of this constant companionship during mundane moments begins with understanding that every waiting room, every delayed appointment, every unexpected pause in your day is actually a perfect training ground for the mind. Most people experience these situations as torture because their untrained minds immediately begin generating anxious commentary, worst-case scenarios, and frustrated resistance. But here's the hidden truth that transforms everything. These moments are precisely designed to teach your mind to serve your soul instead of tormenting it. The transformation that occurs when you approach waiting as mental training rather than mental suffering represents a fundamental shift in how consciousness relates to itself. Instead of allowing your mind to run wild with speculation about how long the delay will last or what problems this might create, you begin using these pauses as opportunities to gently but firmly guide your thoughts toward peace, presence, and trust. The impact of this retraining process extends far beyond finding comfort during inconvenient situations. It literally rewires your neural pathways to default toward calm rather than anxiety. What's happening behind the scenes during this training process is something that most people never realize is possible. A trained mind becomes like a calm lake where nothing stirs the surface for long, creating complete freedom from the suffering that waiting typically produces. This isn't about suppressing difficult emotions or pretending that frustrating situations don't matter. This is about developing the capacity to remain centered regardless of external circumstances, to access inner stability that doesn't depend on everything going according to your personal timeline. The journey from mental chaos to mental calm requires consistent practice in exactly the kinds of ordinary situations we encounter every day. Each time you find yourself in a waiting room, stuck in traffic, or delayed by circumstances beyond your control, you have an opportunity to practice this gentle redirection of mental energy. The decisions you make in these moments about where to focus your attention literally determine whether you'll develop this inner mastery or continue being victimized by your own thought patterns. The revelations that emerge from this practice create a domino effect throughout every area of your life experience. Professional challenges that once triggered stress responses begin to feel manageable because you've trained your mind to remain calm under pressure. Relationships improve because you're no longer bringing mental agitation into your interactions with others. Creative projects flow more easily because you've learned to access inspiration through receptive stillness rather than forcing solutions through mental effort. What makes this training so effective is that it works with the natural rhythm of how consciousness actually operates rather than fighting against it. Instead of trying to eliminate all challenging thoughts or difficult emotions, you simply learn to witness them without being overwhelmed by them. This creates space between you and your mental reactions, allowing you to respond from wisdom rather than automatically reacting from habit. The transformation that occurs when your mind becomes a calm lake rather than a stormy sea affects not just how you experience waiting, but how you navigate every aspect of existence. Uncertainty stops feeling threatening because you've developed the inner stability to remain peaceful regardless of what unfolds. Change becomes an adventure rather than a source of anxiety because you know you have the inner resources to handle whatever emerges. Now, I want to explore exactly how this mental training translates into practical wisdom for navigating the most challenging aspects of modern life, because understanding these principles will give you access to a form of inner freedom that most people never discover is possible. Write in the comments, "My mind is becoming a calm lake." How this mental training translates into practical wisdom for navigating modern life's challenges becomes clear when you understand that every unexpected moment serves a specific purpose in your spiritual development. These interruptions to your carefully planned schedule aren't random inconveniences. They're strategically placed opportunities that interrupt the illusion of control and force you to make a crucial choice. In that split second when circumstances refuse to conform to your expectations, you can either default to automatic reaction or consciously choose spiritual response. This choice point is where all your mental training comes into practical application. The automatic reaction typically involves frustration, resistance, mental commentary about how things should be different, and emotional spiraling into anxiety about future consequences. But the spiritual response emerges from the calm lake mind you've been cultivating, a response that recognizes these moments as invitations to demonstrate the inner mastery you've been developing during all those smaller moments of waiting and delay. The hidden truth that transforms how you navigate these choice points lies in understanding what Emmet Fox called metaphysical treatments. These aren't mystical rituals or complex spiritual practices. They're conscious affirmations of spiritual truth, held with faith to correct false appearances. When unexpected circumstances trigger your typical stress response, you have the power to mentally treat the situation by affirming what you know to be spiritually true, rather than accepting what appears to be temporarily challenging. The impact of learning to apply these treatments in real time creates a completely different relationship with uncertainty and change. Instead of being victimized by circumstances beyond your control, you become someone who understands how to work with spiritual principle to transform your experience from the inside out. This doesn't mean denying difficult realities or pretending that challenging situations don't exist. It means applying higher-level thinking to reframe your understanding of what's actually happening. What's occurring behind the scenes when you apply these treatments is that you're literally shifting the vibrational frequency of your consciousness from fear-based reaction to faith-based response. The decisions you make about which mental frequency to operate from during unexpected moments determine whether you'll experience stress and resistance or peace and flow. This transformation happens not through positive thinking or wishful hoping, but through conscious application of spiritual principles that operate regardless of external circumstances. The journey from automatic reaction to spiritual response requires understanding that every unexpected moment is designed to strengthen your capacity to remain centered when life becomes unpredictable. Each delay, each plan that falls through, each moment when technology fails or people don't show up on time, these are all opportunities to practice what you've learned about maintaining inner stability, regardless of outer chaos. The revelations that emerge from consistently choosing spiritual response over automatic reaction create profound changes in how you navigate every aspect of modern existence. Professional crises that once sent you into panic mode begin to reveal unexpected opportunities for growth and innovation. Relationship challenges that used to trigger defensive reactions become doorways for deeper understanding and communication. Financial uncertainties that previously created overwhelming anxiety transform into occasions for demonstrating trust in divine provision. What makes this approach so powerful is that it works with the fundamental laws of consciousness rather than fighting against them. When you understand that your internal state determines your external experience, you realize that the most practical thing you can do during any challenging situation is to treat it at the level of consciousness, rather than trying to manipulate circumstances through willpower alone. Now, I want to reveal exactly how to formulate and apply these metaphysical treatments in the moment when you need them most, because mastering this skill will give you access to a form of practical spirituality that can transform any situation from obstacle into opportunity. Write in the comments, I choose spiritual response over automatic reaction. Learning to formulate and apply these metaphysical treatments in the moment reveals something profound about the relationship between spiritual truth and practical transformation. The process begins with recognizing that hurry is the disease of our time, a collective madness that convinces us that faster is always better, that immediate results are the only acceptable outcomes, and that anything requiring patience is somehow inferior or inefficient. But here's the hidden truth that changes everything. Nothing true happens in haste. Everything eternal, everything that creates lasting value and genuine transformation, is born in calm. This revelation completely transforms how you understand those moments when life forces you to slow down against your will. Instead of seeing waiting as wasted time that prevents real progress, you begin to recognize it as the natural rhythm required for anything meaningful to emerge. The impact of this shift in perspective creates access to a completely different way of working with time, circumstances, and the unfolding of your deepest aspirations. What's happening behind the scenes when you apply spiritual treatments during forced delays is that you're participating in what Fox understood to be the most creative act possible, waiting in God. This isn't passive resignation or helpless endurance. This is active collaboration with divine intelligence. When you wait with conscious intention, when you hold steady in your faith while circumstances seem uncertain, you're actually creating the conditions necessary for manifestation to occur. The transformation from seeing waiting as inconvenience to recognizing it as creativity begins when you understand that every true wait is pregnancy of the soul. Just as physical pregnancy requires a specific gestation period that cannot be rushed without creating problems, spiritual development follows natural laws of timing that serve purposes your conscious mind cannot fully comprehend. The decisions you make about how to relate to these gestation periods literally determine whether you'll give birth to the solutions, insights, and opportunities that are trying to emerge through you. The journey from impatience to creative waiting requires a fundamental shift in your understanding of how manifestation actually works. Most people approach their desires like demanding children, wanting everything immediately and interpreting any delay as evidence that their good is being withheld. But spiritual maturity recognizes that the delay is often the very mechanism through which your good is being perfected, refined, and prepared for sustainable manifestation. The revelations that emerge from learning to wait creatively rather than passively extend far beyond personal comfort during challenging times. You begin to understand how divine timing coordinates multiple factors simultaneously, preparing you internally while arranging circumstances externally, developing your capacity while dissolving obstacles, strengthening your faith while clearing the path ahead. This coordination happens at a level of intelligence that your logical mind could never orchestrate, but which becomes accessible when you learn to participate consciously in the waiting process. What makes this approach so powerful is that it transforms waiting from empty time into fertile time, from dead space into creative space, from passive endurance into active collaboration with divine intelligence. When you understand that your soul is pregnant with possibilities that require gestation time to develop properly, you stop trying to force premature births and start providing the nurturing conditions necessary for healthy manifestation. The practical impact of embodying this understanding creates profound changes in how you navigate every area of life where patience is required. Career transitions that once felt agonizing become periods of preparation for greater opportunities. Relationship developments that seemed frustratingly slow reveal themselves as necessary foundations for lasting connection. Creative projects that appeared blocked transform into incubation periods for breakthrough inspiration. Now, I want to explore exactly how to recognize when this soul pregnancy is occurring and what specific practices can support the gestation process, because understanding these subtle dynamics will revolutionize your relationship with divine timing and give you confidence to trust the process, even when external evidence suggests nothing is happening. Write in the comments, My soul is pregnant with possibilities. Recognizing when this soul pregnancy is occurring and learning to support the gestation process requires understanding a fundamental distinction that determines whether your waiting becomes creative collaboration or anxious interference. The hidden truth that transforms everything about how you approach periods of uncertainty is this: when you wait with love, you create with God. But when you wait anxiously, constantly checking for progress and demanding evidence that things are moving in the right direction, you actually sow confusion and delay the very manifestation you're hoping to accelerate. This revelation changes everything about how you interpret those restless feelings that arise during waiting periods. The anxiety you feel isn't evidence that something's wrong with the process. It's feedback that you've shifted from love-based waiting into fear-based monitoring. The transformation from one state to the other can happen in an instant, and learning to recognize this shift gives you the power to consciously redirect your energy back toward creative collaboration rather than anxious interference. What's happening behind the scenes during love-based waiting is that you're actually participating in the most sophisticated creative process in the universe. Your faith, your trust, your willingness to remain peaceful while circumstances remain uncertain. These aren't passive qualities, but active forces that help shape the outcome you're waiting for. The decisions you make about whether to approach waiting with love or anxiety literally influence the speed and quality of what eventually manifests. The journey from anxious monitoring to loving collaboration reveals something extraordinary about how consciousness actually operates in the creative process. When you wait with love, you're operating from the understanding that divine intelligence is already working on your behalf, coordinating factors you couldn't even perceive, arranging circumstances in ways that will serve your highest good. This trust creates a vibrational environment that supports manifestation rather than hindering it. The impact of mastering this distinction extends far beyond getting better results from your prayers and intentions. You begin to experience what Fox described as life becoming constant prayer, where waiting transforms from occasional spiritual practice into perpetual communion with God. This doesn't mean walking around in a religious trance or constantly thinking spiritual thoughts. It means living from a foundation of continuous connection that infuses ordinary activities with sacred purpose. The transformation that occurs when waiting becomes perpetual communion creates access to a dimension of existence that most people never experience. Instead of feeling cut off from divine support, except during formal prayer times, you discover that every moment of uncertainty, every pause in activity, every delay in plans becomes an opportunity for intimate connection with the source of all wisdom and love. This continuous communion doesn't require special conditions or perfect circumstances. It simply requires your willingness to recognize that the divine presence is always available, always responsive, always ready to meet you in the space between what was and what's coming. The revelations that emerge from this practice create profound changes in how you navigate every aspect of modern existence. Professional challenges stop feeling isolating because you're approaching them from continuous connection with infinite intelligence. Relationship difficulties transform into opportunities for demonstrating the love and patience you're cultivating through spiritual practice. Financial concerns lose their power to create panic because you're operating from trust in divine provision rather than fear of scarcity. What makes this approach so revolutionary is that it transforms waiting from empty space into sacred space, from dead time into communion time, from anxious endurance into loving participation. When every delay becomes an opportunity for divine connection, you never waste another moment of your life feeling separated from the source of all good. Now, I want to reveal exactly how to maintain this state of perpetual communion even during the most challenging and uncertain circumstances, because mastering this practice will give you access to an unshakable foundation of inner peace that no external situation can disturb. Write in the comments, "My waiting has become communion." Maintaining this state of perpetual communion during challenging circumstances becomes surprisingly accessible when you understand the practical mechanics of transforming waiting into active prayer through breath and awareness. The hidden truth that revolutionizes your entire spiritual practice is elegantly simple. Wherever you remember, God becomes a house of prayer. This isn't metaphorical language. It's literal spiritual technology that you can activate in any location, during any delay, regardless of how mundane or chaotic your surroundings might appear. The transformation happens through the most basic human function that connects you to life itself, your breath. When you consciously breathe while waiting, when you allow your awareness to rest on the simple miracle of air moving in and out of your body, you're not just passing time or practicing relaxation techniques. You're engaging in the most fundamental form of prayer possible, because breath is the bridge between the physical and spiritual dimensions of existence. What's remarkable about this approach is how it transforms any environment into sacred space without requiring external changes or special conditions. The crowded waiting room, the stalled traffic, the delayed flight, the slow-moving line. These locations don't need to be different for you to access divine communion. They simply need to be met with conscious breath and remembering awareness. The impact of this realization creates freedom from the belief that spiritual connection requires perfect circumstances or ideal settings. Behind the scenes of this practice, something profound occurs that most people never experience. Your nervous system begins to shift from stress response to peace response, not because external circumstances have improved, but because you've activated an internal sanctuary that exists independent of outer conditions. The decisions you make about where to place your attention during these moments literally determine whether you'll experience isolation or communion, whether you'll feel trapped by circumstances or supported by divine presence. The journey from seeing waiting as dead time to recognizing it as prayer time happens gradually through consistent practice, but the first shift can occur instantly the moment you choose to breathe consciously. And remember that you're never separate from the source of all life. This remembering doesn't require theological knowledge or religious training. It simply requires your willingness to acknowledge that the same intelligence that sustains your heartbeat is present and available in every moment. How this breath-based communion practice creates a foundation for navigating life's most challenging transitions reveals the ultimate secret of Emmet Fox's teachings, that every ordinary moment contains extraordinary potential for transformation. When you understand that your breath can become prayer, that waiting can become worship, and that delays can become divine appointments, you've discovered something that most people spend their entire lives searching for without ever finding. The journey we've taken together through these concepts isn't just theoretical knowledge. It's practical wisdom that you can begin applying immediately. The next time you find yourself in an unexpected delay, remember what you've learned here. The next time circumstances force you to slow down against your will, recall that you have the tools to transform that moment from frustration into communion. This is how spiritual awakening actually happens, not through dramatic revelations in perfect settings, but through conscious choices in ordinary moments. If this message has resonated with you, if you felt something shift in how you understand waiting and presence, then I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel. The content we create here is designed to bridge the gap between ancient wisdom and modern life, giving you practical tools for finding the sacred in the everyday. There's so much more to explore together on this path of conscious living. And if you've made it all the way to this point in our conversation, leave a comment saying, "This message was meant for me." Because honestly, the fact that you're here, that you've stayed present for this entire journey through the mystery of waiting, tells me that you're someone who's ready to see life differently. Your presence here isn't accidental. The connection we've shared through this exploration of sacred waiting feels significant. And if it's touched something real in your experience, a simple like on this video helps that energy reach others who might need to hear exactly what you've just discovered. There's a video right here that takes this conversation even deeper into the practical applications of finding God in daily life. Click and continue with me over there, because what we've started here is just the beginning of a much larger understanding about how consciousness and circumstances dance together in the most beautiful ways.